Hi everybody, my name is Sebastian and today I will tell you a little bit about my real-life experiences with Dart. And as Franz already mentioned, it will have some relation to JavaScript, first and foremost because Dart is usually used to replace JavaScript, to be compiled to JavaScript. So first, one sentence about me. My name is Sebastian. I'm as well working for Blossom, doing all things code at Blossom. And as already said, we are using Dart in the front end and Python in the back end. And in my free time, I'm also doing a few projects with Dart. So that's why I decided to tell you all about it. And when I introduced the idea to Roland, I think, then he said, no, we had a Dart introduction, don't do that. Tell us a little bit about real life. So I actually did it. And I do it with Blitzlicht. As said, it's my weekend project. And what is Blitzlicht? It's actually a Slack bot which helps you ask one important question, gather all the answers, and get some insights about your team, the persons who are inside the Slack community. As said, it's not about a big questionnaire with 20 questions about everything. It's just one question, and there you go. So you're telling Blitzlicht, you're adding the Blitzlicht application to your Slack. Then you're telling Blitzlicht, okay, this is my question. It records it. Then people can answer and tell them how they're doing in this example or some other question. And then Blitzlicht will use some machine learning stuff to actually figure out what's the sentiment behind it, if people are happy or sad or in this example joy, and give you some insights. And of course, this is just the beginning. So the idea is to grow this bigger so Blitzlicht can actually understand what people are feeling, how people are feeling, and what they actually mean with all their different sentences that they are writing. So you don't have to actually dig deep into every little answer, but actually get a big picture. And if you're into this bot stuff and are excited about Facebook bots and Slack bots and everything, there is the bots meetup if you didn't recognize it. They met yesterday at IBM and they do it monthly, so go there if you're into bots. And that's all I do of advertisement. And because this is JavaScript and Franz has a hard rule about code, I'll dive into code right away. Let's start with WebSocket stuff. So for this Slack bot, you need WebSockets because that's how Slack bots communicate. So you're opening a WebSocket connection to Slack, tell them about the channel you want to listen to. Obviously, you need to have permissions for that. And then you're getting every message through the WebSocket, and then you can process them whatever you want. And in Dart, it looks something like this. So we have a function. In this case, it's called connect. And it uses the WebSocket library, which is a pub package, so kind of NPM for Dart. We have the same in Dart. Not the same, but mostly the same, where you can publish packages, and WebSockets is one of these packages. You're using connect, and it gives you a WebSocket, which you can then configure and tell him where to listen. So in this case, I listen, and whenever a message comes, it should use the process method to pass the message in. If it's done, so if the WebSocket closes, it should call reconnect, and on error, it should also call reconnect. In this case, it's only because I just want to stay connected all the time. And from this example, we can actually see that it's pretty similar to JavaScript in some ways. So we also have the futures with the then synonym, so you can actually work the same way. I will also come to Async Wait, which is also in Dart. A little difference you might notice above here. So Dart is loosely, or it's a typed language, so you can actually have types in there. And the compiler or the analyzer actually checks these types. So if you have like, I want to have a string in my example and you're passing in an int, the analyzer will tell you, hey, that's not correct, you need to change this, much like in every typed language. But Dart is, in this case, special that it doesn't check it in when you are transpiling it to JavaScript. It doesn't use this in the final outcome. So you actually could write code where you're passing an int in there, and the analyzer will notice, but the transpiler won't. So you could compile an example where the connect message is called with an integer instead of a string. So make sure to always run analyze if you're using this types. And those are optional, so you don't need them. If you want them to have a structure in your program, if you want these strong types, then you can use them, or you can just leave them out no matter what. You can also make a mixture, so there is not like, I believe in PHP where they introduced strict typing, but you need to do it for one file at a time. And here you can actually use it for one parameter and not for the other parameter, or mix it the other way around, whatever you want. And the process method in this example is just a normal method where you can, okay, we are decoding the message we get. It's JSON, so we're making a map out of it. And then we can do something. For Blitzlicht, it would now go into a state machine where it checks is actually already a message there, and then it processes or it records the question. If there is already a question, then it would collect the answer and pass it through the machine learning code, and so on. But that's just plain old code, so I didn't show it here. Next one, an API. So there is a front end for Blitzlicht as well, which is an Angular app, which I will show later on after the API. And it's used for showing the results and having a sign-up process and everything. And because it's a one-page application, I need an API. And there is a pretty nice library which is called Redstone. And this library is pretty much the Flask of Dart. So you have a pretty basic like web framework which you can use for APIs or also for basic web stuff. And as you can see here, packages are imported with the import statement. So this is another pub package which you can just install through the package manager. And you're calling just app start, and then it's good to go. You can define routes, obviously. Here I have a group which is called API Blitzlicht. This means that under the /API/Blitzlicht, all the endpoints are recorded. Nice sound. And there I have a route for the ID. So you can actually call each Blitzlicht and get the results out of there. And these app are annotations to tell the Redstone framework which routes I want to use. And yeah, which routes I want to use. And here we have an example of the Async Wait, which I already mentioned before. So if you have a method which is a future, which completes in the future sometimes, which in this case is a repo find one, and you don't want to execute it asynchronously, but I would actually wait for the method to complete, you can use the await statement. So after when it reaches this line, it will actually wait for repo find one to complete and then get back. Of course, you could also leave the await away, and then it would just go on and in the future sometimes complete. But then you would need, of course, to make sure that Blitzlicht is not empty, because it could be not empty. And what we see here, the add repo, repository repo, is actually dependency injection. So Redstone uses the dependency injection framework. So the repository is the class I wrote, which is pretty much a wrapper on MongoDB. So I don't have to, if I want to get one question with all the answers out of the database, I can use the repository. And I pass it in as a dependency injection, so my tests don't need an actual database connection. And what else do we have here? Well, that's pretty much it. Oh no, the repo find one. Yeah, okay, I already talked about this. It's the repository which will actually find me one repo which is a future, so I have to use await. Quick dive into AngularDart. So AngularJS, I bet many of you are familiar with this, or actually seen some code. And AngularDart is the port of Angular 2 to Dart. So it's pretty much the same thing, just in Dart. And you will recognize this bootstrap method. I believe it's the same in AngularJS. So we are again importing the Angular stuff and bootstrapping the app component. And in our JavaScript, we need some Dart code. So we are importing the main Dart, which I showed you before, and some other stuff. and our body is just one DOM element, which in this case is called Blitzlicht, which is then filled from the Angular application. And this app component looks like this. So we have the directive providers, which I think are the same as in AngularJS. So the selector is actually the DOM component you want to fill from the component. You have the template URL, which is the template which gets filled in. The root config, which we inject from above from the providers, is there to define all your roots you want to have. I actually snipped it, so there are much more, but one is sufficient to show the idea. And then in your app component, you can have, for example, an ng-on-init, which is executed as soon as the component is initialized. And in this case, it's just printing to, which is a console log in this case. So nothing important here, but just to show it. And what's not shown here is that you actually need to import all the components you're using. So if the components are in different files, you obviously need to import them as well. And then the index component in this case, which is at the slash, is actually pretty much the same, and just here for completion. That's it from my code examples. A little bit insights from Dart at Blossom, where we are using Dart and Backbone.js, which is Backbone.js is the old stack, and we migrated most of it to Dart. A little bit is over there now, and it's not completed yet, but most of it is. And for me, when I joined Blossom, it was like, okay, Dart, new language, and I really liked it because for me, JavaScript, and I hate to say this at a JavaScript meetup, but for me, JavaScript was always like, okay, I have to use it because it's the only thing I can use really in the browser, and there is CoffeeScript and there's TypeScript, but it's still the same language, and it doesn't really feel like 100%. And I really like Dart for the let's say how do you call it? Like it feels like one language, not just something which was coded and then there was parts stick to it and then added something on top and oh, we need this, but actually one language which was designed with all these principles in mind from the beginning. Like, for example, the whole import mechanism. There is nothing around it. You're using it just like in any other programming language like Python, like Ruby. You have some package manager and you import packages and you can build your own packages and that's it. And in JavaScript, it's always like a little bit of a hassle. And so it's working pretty good. Especially the type safety catched many errors for us. So when we ran the analyzer and we see, okay, there are some stuff where we're passing things around which should not be, then you can actually check it and see, oh yeah, right, we are not checking for this and that there, or we are not converting it correctly. And this might catch errors in the future and makes it easier to actually develop. And as it's not strictly typed, but optionally typed, we can, when in development mode, we can actually just write some functions which don't have a type and which just take anything just for development, and then we see it's working, and then we can add types later on, or only add types for the public-facing stuff and not for the internal, like private methods, which is very nice. One thing which I didn't mention, which is really nice, at least in my case, is classes can have or have implicit getters and setters. So everything you call on class properties are actually going through getters and setters, even if you don't write them. And later on, you can write getters and setters if you need them. So it's not like in Java where you actually need to write a getter setter before, because otherwise somebody's accessing the public property and you need to change all the code which is calling it. But the other way around, every time somebody's accessing the property, he's implicitly going through a getter. And if you write the getter later on, it will go through the getter without changing the calling code, which I think, for example, is a pretty nice example of a really thought through language feature, which makes things much, much easier, because you can just do all the variables public, and later on you're switching them to private, make a public getter and setter, and you don't need to change the client code. A few things which are not so nice is obviously the small community. So JavaScript has a huge community, and there is so much going on, and every day a new framework, and hundreds of people here, and the Dart meetup is pretty much 6 of us sitting in a room and discussing what we did last month. And that's obviously a big minus, especially in terms of tools. So the Dart ecosystem is evolving, but it's on a very, very slow pace. So of course there are some libraries out there like Redstone and WebSockets and stuff. There is stuff there, but usually you have like one. So there is one WebSocket, and if you don't like it or if it's broken, then yeah, there you go. You can develop it on your own. Or, I mean, there is a community. We have a pretty active Slack community, but after all, it's just a few people. So it would be nice to see some adoption. So if you like Dart, then start. We are here to help. Yeah.
What's it? I mean, you're saying there's just one option. Does that mean you can't interoperate with JavaScript very well?
Well, yeah, you can. There is a JavaScript interoperable layer, but you're losing obviously all the features from Dart, and sometimes it's a hassle. For example, I did some stuff for Blossom where we need to use jQuery UI for something, and you can do it, but then you actually have to work around the stuff like in combination with the Dart, we are using Web UI, which is kind of the before Polymer stuff. And it's actually so it takes a little time to render. So I actually need to wait until it's rendered, but I don't get a feedback from this. So I need to have a timer and wait like 50 milliseconds, and then I can use the jQuery. And then when I look at the backbone code where it's ported from, it's much easier. And then you have to pass objects around, so you need to actually parse them to JSON and pass them back, and it's a hassle. So there is a possibility, and there are some nice examples, but usually it's not that easy, or at least it could be. It's way easier to work with the Dart API than with a JavaScript API. So that's obviously a big minus for us. And I mean, I'm sure JavaScript developers are familiar with this, that frameworks and stuff gets outdated pretty fast. The same is true for Dart. So they had Web UI and they deprecated it, and now there is all Polymer. And then there was AngularDart. And Polymer by now, the 0 point are already deprecated, so they are 1 point. So it's even though there are not that many people working on it, stuff evolves pretty fast for these things, and then you're like stuck with the old version and need to find your way. On the server side, Dart is, I mean, from my experience, pretty stable. I didn't have any issues. It works pretty well. But then again, small community. All the stuff which is already there for, I don't know, Python. Python, there is like Slack, for Slack bots, there is like a framework there. And you just need to program your stuff. For Dart, you have to start from the beginning, do the WebSockets, do the authentication stuff, and go from there and do your stuff on your own. So it takes a little bit longer.
So you're saying that there's like a lack of community, lack of libraries. I really like Dart. I like the syntax. I like that the VM is quite fast. It's beautiful, and it just sucks that it just wasn't adapted like 5 years ago when it was made and like people were excited about it. It just kind of sat around.
Yeah.
So right now, it's kind of like undead, I feel like.
Well, I wouldn't call it undead. It's pretty much alive. From what I mean, there is an active community. It's just not growing, and which is not the same as dead. So
I guess my question is, if you were to start again, would you use Python or something that had more library support? Like honestly,
that's a tough question. I might use JavaScript, starting all over, but then again. I mean, JavaScript, I mean, it's always green on the other side. So it's usually you're stuck with something, and if you're looking into JavaScript, I mean, I have a JavaScript project which I maintain, and it's the same stuff, just the other way around. Outdated dependencies, and then this doesn't work, and this doesn't look nice. And for Dart, it's pretty much the same, just on the other end. So Dart has a very nice language and a very nice VM, but not a big community. JavaScript is a big community, and maybe the syntax is not that nice, and you need TypeScript to make it bearable. So yeah, that's pretty much my summary as well. The Dart has some very nice moments. I really like developing the language. I would love, as you said, I would love to have it more traction and to have people checking it out. So if you like it, it's pretty decent. Just go ahead, do some experiments. There is actually Dartpad, which is like Dart in the browser. You can just type and it will execute. So you can play around with it a bit and maybe do a little side project and have fun. Thank you very much.
Thank you for watching this talk. Down below you can find our channel ViennaJS, where you can find a lot of different videos about front-end and back-end JavaScript, and feel free to subscribe.